Yes? Okay, I'd like to call our Finance and Audit meeting for June 8th, 2023 to order at 8:32 a.m. We have all members of the committee present. We have minutes for approval. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Teresa and Kelly, second. Any comments, questions? No? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Any public comment?
Nobody signed up.
No one signed up. All right. Member comments? None? Okay, we're on to routine consent agenda. Items that members would like pulled. Anything? Larry?
7, 8.
8. Okay. Any others? If not, then I'll entertain a motion to approve items 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, and 10. Brian and Carolyn will go to vote. Terry?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Teresa?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Motion carries. Okay, those items are all approved. We're on to item 7, 8. I'll entertain a motion. Teresa, Larry? Larry, you pulled this one?
Yeah. Hi, Tom.
Good morning. How are you?
Hi. Good.
Tom, if you could introduce yourself for those watching at home that don't know who you are.
My name is Tom Manarella, the administrator of Valley High Nursing Rehab.
Thank you very much.
Just was looking for an update because I haven't heard what the Valley High reserves are lately.
You know, off the top of my head, I don't have the number, but they're healthy. I think they're in the 27 range.
Yeah, they are, yeah, I mean, I can pull it out of my
No, that's okay.
folder, but
That's
it's, yeah,
okay.
it's between 26 and 27.
26 and 27 million.
Yep.
And then when I was reading through this, this project looks like it's moving forward well. That's great. But I didn't see like is there an estimated start date?
We are targeting August,
This August.
this August.
And an estimated completion date.
Hopefully being completed in 2024. Originally projected it would be early 2025, but we didn't think we would start the project in August. We were thinking we would break ground sometime in late winter. So we're already ahead of schedule.
Okay, that's great. That's all I really was curious about. Thank you.
Other members have questions?
Just,
Kelly?
so, you know, we have a certain capacity in there and a certain differentiation between who pays what. Wondering if that's going to be affected at all, if the income's going to be affected during the renovations.
Right now, we have the 2 hallways already offline. And so where we're running, it just is going to stay the same until we open the new unit. As far as licensed capacity, we're not adding beds, so when we open this unit, we'll be back to where we were at before. But there should be no impact to kind of the financial picture right now because we've had the 2 hallways offline for quite some time.
So what's the projection for income after these are open? Is it the same as it is right now?
No, the income will go up as census goes up. We have a conversation that has not occurred yet, which will be in regard to case mix. And that conversation will then determine the income. So I could throw all kinds of numbers at you, but they're meaningless until we know what we're going to do as the case mix part. And we talked very briefly at the operating committee meeting earlier this week about the need to have that conversation, but I would say we're probably 6 months to 8 months premature for that.
Any other members? Nope. Okay, we'll go to vote on item 7, 8 then. Brian?
Yes.
Teresa?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We are on to 10.1, MCEDC Modernization Marketing Area Proposal.
Thank you, Chairman. And for those at home, I'm Jim McHenry, the President and CEO of McHenry County Economic Development Council. We appreciate your feedback from the last couple of meetings that we've had, and we've revised. Why don't you distribute that, please? We've revised the program, and this is a check-in with you to be able to see if we're on the right track, to be able to evaluate how to affect this. We've also met with a number of businesses around the region in order to have a check-in with them to make sure that this is going to be sufficiently valuable to the situation. We've met with economic development, municipal professionals, and the Chamber of Commerce leadership local Chamber of Commerce leadership in order to do that. And I think what I'll do is, as soon as we get these distributed, we'll have Ed describe the program. What we've redesigned it as is essentially, for those of you that have been through LGMC, the Leadership McHenry County, Greater McHenry County Group, we've redesigned this as a marketing program for small business that emulates the LGMC model, which is the notion of having an ongoing leadership set of activities in a seminar, day-long, half-day-long type of bias with, for those of you that have studied LGMC, you know that it was sponsored at the very beginning, and then later it became a scholarship program, and then later it became a pay program or a tuition-based program. And it's our hope in a sustainable model to have a similar style of development as we go along with an alumni core of people that are reasonably expert in these particular areas. So with that, Ed, why don't you walk us through the one-pager?
Okay, so again, thank you for your time. I think everybody remembers last time we were here, we spoke about the need for a program like this for small businesses, all predicated on the challenge going into the pandemic and now the challenge coming out of the pandemic. And so the rationale behind why we want to do this is we feel we need to provide the training, the tools with our small business community to help them basically compete in the new normal, as you've heard before, everybody calls it the new normal, and it really is. And so we're hoping that we can take them beyond their pre-pandemic levels of success. So the objective is really to help them during this period of time, again, like I said, not just meet, but exceed where they were before the pandemic, which has changed a lot of things, and it's required businesses now at this point to have certain tools and capabilities. So that's what we want to do with this program. The way it's going to be, what it's going to look like is it's going to be based on a seminar program, which is one of the things you all talked about last time. So we took it to heart and we really thought about it, and quite frankly, I think based on that feedback, we've come up with a better model proposal here. But it'll be based on a seminar series, so one component or the one part of it will be a seminar. The other value or benefit to the program will be potential on-site training for the participants in the program, and I'll speak more to that in a minute. But all of it's designed to take the 90 companies that we've targeted for this program. They'll take the 90 companies and help them elevate their marketing capabilities, their revenue generation, and also their visibility, ultimately their visibility, which we think is really important at this point in time. And in talking to a number of the different businesses and different people in the municipalities, we're finding out that this absolutely is something that would be of value to them at this point in time. So,
pardon me to interrupt, but we haven't actually targeted the companies. We're just saying 90 companies. So
Yeah.
we'll come back to how the selection criteria looks at the time. Please.
and that was with budget in mind and so forth. So, so the components, let me break it down now for you. It would be, like we said, 90 companies we're thinking of selecting, having in this program. And we would have an expanded or protracted application period, because we remember that conversation from the last meeting. We were talking about how, we want to make sure everyone has a chance to at least be aware of it and sign up for it. Yes, there's a limit, but we want everyone to at least have the opportunity. So we'll keep that in mind. We'll have an extended registration period. We're looking, the question that jumps out is, well, what's small business defines small? So we're looking at, and would love any thoughts and comments or feedback on this, but we're looking at something, businesses with revenues above $3 million, under 100 full-time employees equivalents, and in any industry, we're not going to try to pick and choose an industry. We think that the people that need this the most should be allowed to register and participate. Those 90 would be split into 3 groups, 3 series, if you will, each with 30 companies. And we would, in a way to make the selection as fair and as broad as possible, we would group them into 3 groups, cluster them, and then have those, execute the seminar series and so forth. The benefits of the program are basically kind of what I said in my opening. It's around providing them access to what's out there to help them elevate their business. It's the tools that are out there, but we wanted to take it one step further. We didn't want it to be a seminar and then everyone leaves and whatever happens, happens. We wanted to then provide a tool or an assistant in helping them set this up, what they've learned, walk through what they've learned, make sure they have an understanding. So we really want to not just help them with the learnings, but with the implementation of it as well. And we think that's going to increase the success factor of the program by doing that. I've grouped, you can see the three groups. These, again, if there's something here that you think is a better way to go in terms of grouping, we're happy to hear about it. As Jim said, we're here to just make sure we're on the same track, we're on the right track. So if you see anything, we'd love the feedback. It's going to be a full-day session, so it'll be from 8 to 5, obviously with breaks and lunch provided. We understand that small business owners are typically the ones that are on the floor working every day, so we're trying to be as efficient as we can, as economical with time as possible. Financials, so what it would look like. So the full-day seminar, which would be conducted by local consultants, there would be a budget for that day where they would develop the content and deliver the presentations, $10,000 per seminar. And we think that's about right, just from talking to folks, because again, they'll be developing the content and then delivering the seminar, the learnings. They'll also sign up for providing a 2-hour on-site free consultation where they go and what I had just mentioned, they go and they explain and how you implement, how you work these, how you leverage these tools, and so forth. For the consultants will be paid $1,000 per company that goes to that final step. Some may not do it, but the point being, we suspect most will. And we'll negotiate that will be $1,000 that the consultants will get out of it. So for our local consultants, it's a nice revenue opportunity for them to the tune of about $40,000. And we'll have 3 different consultants is the way we're looking at it right now for each one for each series. Then there will be, so for the total program, that'd be $120,000. So roughly half of the business, half of the volume would be relative to the consultant's fee, half of the cost. And then we would have some materials, the lunch, the snacks, about $8,300. The campaign for promotion and awareness, about $45,000. The administration cost of $40,000 for a total budget of $213,000. And that's assuming the $213,000 is assuming all 90 take advantage of the 2-hour on-site consultation training. Okay. To help the reach and scalability of the program, we're looking at programs that are software programs, platforms from the internet that are no cost to very low cost. Because what we want any business, any small business, to be able to afford this if they wanted to accelerate or elevate their capabilities, and they can do that by them starting with a paid program. But there are a lot of programs out there that are very little expense or no expense. The sustainability aspect, again, like I said, this will be driven by or delivered by local consultants. We haven't decided who. We have one in mind of the 3 only right now, just in mind. But we would want to do some due diligence on that, make sure that we're making the right selection in terms of those consultants. And as I said, they would develop the content and so forth. But over time, for the next program, after these 3 series, for the next program, to ensure sustainability of this program, what we would be looking to do is, like Jim had said, with the leadership model, train the trainer, and use the alumni from this first program to help mitigate the consultant expenses. So take take a dozen of the alumni from the LGC-MC and use them to be the consultants that are delivering the learnings and the expertise. Plus, they come with the added advantage of saying, hey, I did it, it works. We think that would, if we can do that, we could probably bring the cost down about 50% for the next go-around. And then beyond that, we probably could do it maybe another 50% reduction. So the objective is to, over time, help this remain affordable and become more affordable, is to leverage the train-to-trainer concept like we do with the leadership program, and eventually reduce the consultant costs. So in doing this, we're thinking too, and this will be a big assistance for the selection process, would be to, and if you all feel that this program is of value and you green-lighted it at some point, we would then look to develop an advisory board, advisory team that would help us with the advocacy, evaluation, serve as ambassadors possibly, but be involved in the success and advocacy of the program. Thinking a 2-year term would probably make sense, and then it would be made up of, could be made up of business owners, municipality, EDC folks, who a couple of them I've spoken to already, and they from a top-line perspective, they understand the program and would absolutely endorse it. County board members, and then our own representatives. But that would be a function of a board or team that would kind of oversee the success, execution, and implementation. Okay. The bottom is just a kind of a pictorial of what it would look like. Questions? Somebody called in with a question. Perfect timing. Well, but again, we did take back the feedback from the prior meeting with you all and felt that this was a program that could be would be very well received, because this is about providing the capabilities, the learnings, and the tools that they need to get them to where they need to get to with their business. So we really hope that you see it the same way and support it.
And we value your input.
Yeah.
Good question. How many small businesses meeting this definition are there in McHenry County?
About 3,800.
Okay, and looking back, how many of that category of business closed during Pritzker's shutdown?
We had 10,100 businesses prior to the pandemic. We had about 1,000 close, and traditionally we would have about 300 of those 1,000 close anyhow.
Okay, I had heard it was as high as 60% of small businesses in McHenry County.
I don't believe that's the case, but
Okay.
it may be how you define small businesses.
Okay, so you're saying maybe more close to 10%.
It was approximately 10%, and the majority of the businesses, as we observed, were businesses that were cash-based businesses that didn't fulfill the obligations necessary to be qualified for PPP reimbursement or other
Okay.
areas, so they couldn't prove how much revenue they technically earned over the years that they had.
Okay,
I'm not saying that's exclusive, but that's one of the primary causes.
well, right, and we don't know
We don't know.
that they would have gone out of business anyway,
Correct, we
because
don't
of their models. Okay, and do you know in this market, you said about 3,800, how much revenue is generated from those businesses as far as a percentage of McHenry County's economy? I know it's a big question.
I'm in a public
something to
meeting and I
think
don't want to be
about.
wrong on this,
Okay.
so let me
It's
just say,
something to think
I
about,
think,
yeah.
the backbone of McHenry County's economic programming and the economic prosperity is based around small business.
It is.
So I would say that a great percentage of the revenue that's produced out of that 3,800 is significant to our marketplace.
Could you guys look into whether that's a question that can be answered? I believe it is.
we will.
Which could even go, I mean, because you know the size of McHenry County's economy?
Right.
Yeah, okay. That's it for now. Oh, one other thing. On these alumni that would be teaching the program, would they be compensated?
We haven't determined that. I think the advisory group would determine that, but I think yes, they might be compensated. But at the same time, there's a very strong give back in our community for folks that are interested in trying to do this. I think they have a lot of pride in the idea that they're successful at what they did and would like to share that with other businesses. So the answer is that's a work in progress to figure out whether or not we can find a volunteer network that's sufficient and qualified to be able to make that a meaningful next iteration of the program.
Thank you.
Brian?
Appreciate y'all being here and appreciate the work that you've done to try to perfect this approach. I think it's a good approach in terms of the seminar and the educational element of it, so I'm grateful for that. I also appreciate the outright effort to counsel as a follow-up with particular companies. I guess I have questions about 3 different areas. The first is selection. I still haven't wrapped my arms around what it is that you plan to do. I don't need absolutes, but how are you going to select these companies? I mean, you've got 3,800 companies, right?
Yep.
How are you going to select the 90?
The selection criteria.
Yeah, and what are those?
Yeah, well, I think a big part of it is we don't know who's going to respond, how many are going to respond. From the people we've spoken to, we feel that it's pretty certain that a lot will gravitate towards this because it's what they need right now, some of the challenges that they have. So we suspect that we'll have 90 sign up by the sign-up date, by the cutoff date. We will have to ensure that the criteria is met. If it ends up being 3 million plus and 100 FTEs, we'll have to make sure that there's some documentation or some proof, so it's fair that these that are signing up meet that criteria. I think in terms of how does the selection process close out? I think there's a date, and who's ever signed up by that, whoever is appropriately signed up, that qualifies as eligible, that have signed up, they will be the ones put into the program. Does that answer the question?
Well, Brian, I think the other part of that question is that we are going to have a metric, a criteria, a score sheet that allows us to get through that envelope. And we haven't developed that yet, but we do know that there's 3 geographic regions that we have to pull 30 companies from. So part of the selection process is going to be located within the geography that is in the area. And then I think our advisory group is going to identify some of the key criteria we'd like to have within that framework.
And Brian, just to clarify too, because we'll look at it through the clusters. So we want to rotate. I didn't mention this. I apologize, but we're going to have 3 series. So we're going to have 3 locations, different locations. Ideally, this is the thinking, where we have the seminar, where we have the one-day seminar. And so from that cluster, we'll be selecting actually 30 of the 90. So I don't know if that helps, but it's 3 selections from 30 rather than the first 90. We'll get the 90. It'll have the criteria like the matrix, like Jim's saying, and then we'll be looking at it within the localized areas.
Okay. I guess one of my challenges is that I think it's important to identify what that matrix is and what that selection process is going to be. It's just kind of like applying for a grant. You're not going to apply for a grant for parks when the grant is for highway improvement. So you need to have some degree of matrix or selection criteria so that people are aware. In today's environment, we don't just apply for something without having some idea whether we're feasibly going to have a chance to get there. Now, if you're telling me that it's just going to be the first 30 that sign up in a geographic location, then that's one thing. That's fine. But I'm not sure that that's the best thing to do. So I would be interested in kind of what those selection criteria might be so that when you're doing your promotion, people know how they're going to be reviewed.
Yeah, well said. So if this idea of the promotion of the revised program that we're trying to do is sufficient, we'll come back to you under the formal application process with the exact criteria that we look for, with solicitation from all of you on what you think that criteria should be.
All right. I'm also understanding, Ed, from your commentary then, that this is going to be geographically based. So the cohorts, if you will, of 30 businesses, those are going to be based upon geographics and not based upon company size or scale or anything like that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and we're trying to do that to get a fair representation throughout the county. And that was something we talked about last time as well, how to make sure everyone's getting an opportunity to participate. So yes, now, like I said, the $3 million, we don't know yet if that's the right number. We'll put more due diligence into that. But there will be a process by which the 30 that we select from the Cary Crystal Lake area will have to meet the same metrics. Yeah, I don't think there's, I mean, unless there's a way or someone's done it before, a way to ensure complete equity of selection. But I do think, and you made me think about some other things we've done in the past, I do think that there does have to be a certain level of capability within the business, meaning if somebody is not at all online friendly, tech savvy, what have you, this may be a big lift for them, so it may not be right for them. So we do probably need to provide some kind of a context on who this could help, who this would best be able to help.
I guess I'm thinking about, and I appreciate that, I think I'm considering it based upon educational programming, if you will. You don't want, if you are looking at students, businesses who are very basic at one level, then that's one thing. If you're looking at students or businesses that are at more of an intermediate level, that's a whole different type of thing.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that certain ones who are not advanced are also interested, but they're looking more at efficiencies and they want to move things forward at another level. So that's one thing.
Right.
I think the second thing is the size of companies. If there is a similarity there in terms of their approach, then I think there's going to be greater dialogue, greater interaction, a greater sense of collaboration that can be derived and networking that can be derived and held for a longer period of time. Because one of the things that I would suggest is really important here is that these businesses, once they've gone through this process and they exit the process, they're going to maintain that contact.
Right.
They're not necessarily going to say, okay, too bad, so sad, never want to see you again. That's not the idea here. I think that we want to promote this collegiality, we want to promote the networking, and thereby, for the county, promote the synergism that is derived from that network. So I think you need to start with some degree of, personal opinion, of I hate the word conformity, that's not what I'm really looking for, but
Uniformity.
similarities
Yep.
in terms of background,
Yeah.
experience, size perhaps.
Brian, you mentioned the cohort aspect of this at the beginning, and we did take that to heart as the LGMC model. I presented to that several times. There's the LGMC class model, and then there's the color groups, and they have their own sense of pride that's associated with
Right.
each of those areas. We see that we can develop that similar style of model with cohort groups that are specialized in certain areas of, let's say, network marketing and social media presence, and then larger, the class, the inaugural class, the second class, the third class of such a leadership and marketing type of component. And again, I think it's rather organic that we're going to develop it, but it's there that we want to try to do that.
All right, these are just some surface thoughts, and I probably shouldn't be taking up the committee's time to discuss this, but these are some of my thoughts. The third one has to do with just the financing, and I would just appreciate it maybe, and you've walked through here, I get it, that's a walkthrough, but what's it come out to be a total type of thing? What's the bottom line in terms of, you're looking at the program today, tomorrow, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, and how does that work? Sustainability is huge. That's something that we've all talked about. Show us how that sustainability is there. So, and you discussed it, don't get me wrong. You just mentioned it, but let's see that visually.
Yeah, so.
He wants to see it visually, so is that what you just said? Yeah, so provide it visually back to you.
Right,
Well done.
Okay.
thanks. That's it, sorry.
We'll just go around the room. Teresa?
I was realizing this is just a discussion, we're not gonna be voting on this, this is to help develop
Make sure we're on
the
the
real
right track.
proposal, yeah. So, I would be interested in seeing already, like, how effective is your outreach to the small businesses? So, like, there's one thing, like, having to narrow it down to having only 30 businesses per session, but then even getting those 30 businesses per session, how feasible is that? I'm wondering if, when it comes down to it, we'd want to see like a cost per participant. I also agree that the criteria has to be really fleshed out as to how you would pick these businesses, assuming that you get too many, right? So I have both concerns. You get too many and how you're going to choose them, and you only get like 5, right, or something ridiculously low. And then are we really gonna pay the full amount for a few businesses? I'd like to see the timeline and when you think this would start. Yeah, if you're like, there was another question, but I'm gonna defer down the line.
Larry?
Oh, sure. Well, just as a comment, I think the 3 million in sales is a rather high threshold. If you get a small business, I'm thinking of the local store owner, construction company, something where he's got a handful of people that works for him. That's the comment. And then the sustainability. So there would be 90 businesses the first year, with then 90 more the second year?
It's our hope to have that sort of
And third year and see how it goes.
We don't think there's a saturation point among 3,800 businesses in which 90 businesses is going to be insurmountable. And it's our goal, ultimately, like the LGMC model was, this is a show me county, we had to prove in LGMC that the leadership components were worth it. And then after it gained some momentum, it became its own driver and desirable place to be. So it's our hope that that's the same model that we're building here.
So there'd be 90 new ones every year.
It's our hope.
And hopefully with a 50% cost reduction because of the way you train the trainers that are coming in when we paid consultants kind of thing. Okay. And I guess that's where I'm at right now with that. No, I'll let somebody else go. Go ahead.
Carolyn?
No, I think we've talked, I think the LGMC came up last time. We had talked about that last time they were here, and it is a very interesting model. It's been a very successful model. One of the things they do require to be in the program is that you have to give back. There's an expectation that you're going to be participating in the helping with the programming in the following year, and not just the following year. You know, you're now you're an alumni and you're part of the program, and so maybe some of the selection criteria is that commitment to the program going forward. I'm thinking there's even kind of I thought the expectation was more about, you know, giving back in terms of helping with the consulting stuff, but even maybe, you know, contributing to the cause down the line when you're able to do that as well. So it looks like you're trying to target like a more uniform group by identifying the amount of sales and the number of employees, kind of getting to Brian's point. No, and I think that was an interesting thing to do, to go ahead and model it in that way. Go ahead.
When you're done,
No.
I was just going at the chairman. So the acronym, LMGC, what is the training program?
That's the leadership Greater McHenry County.
Okay.
And it's a 34-year-old program, maybe that's right. Is that 20-something
Yeah, it
year old
started
program?
in 2005.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it. Yeah, 2005. And each class is like,
Yeah.
we're the best.
So
I've never seen.
how is this different than that then?
So that is a leadership program designed to help, for the most part, build leadership skills into the social service agencies' board member criteria. So these are business leaders that come into a program, get exposed to a broad range of social service and social platform programs throughout the region, and teach them leadership skills to be effective at advisory, board member, and other participation at that level of volunteer service throughout our region. It has little to do, it has some to do with how the business operates. It has less to do with how the business operates and more to do how a leader integrates into the community and benefits the overall social and leadership structure of our area.
Okay.
But the model of participation, of development, of giving back, of forward thinking and year over year is a similar style of model. We just have a different amount of content.
Are you done?
So I think this would be wonderful for the businesses in the community. They obviously, not everybody has the expertise. I just have a couple questions and suggestions. So first, if you look at the the groupings, you have them by location. I think that's good for networking, but I would almost wonder, have you considered doing it by type of business? Because you could then, when you're training, you could kind of cater the training to that specific type of business. Because it would be, the training I think would be different if you have a retail storefront versus a manufacturing company. So it's just a thought. Or even you were talking about level of experience. If you have some stores or companies that have higher experience with some of this stuff and some that are on zero, that just some ideas to throw out there. I agree with Larry that the 300 does seem a little bit high, just with some of the retail shops on downtown. But I am interested in seeing the selection process, especially if you have like 150 people or 150 companies. How are you going to narrow that down? What I worry is, I don't worry. I think it's necessary for us as a county to see that you're picking companies that will be successful whether or not they take this class. So if you have a company that may close anyway, and I know this is a hard cutoff, but if you have a struggling business and they're doing this as a last resort, yes, we want to help them, but is that a good use of county resources that they would close anyway? So that's just, I don't know how you would deal with that if you're looking at revenue projections or sales projections. And then I just want to know, do you have a specific goal of revenue or growth in the county from this program?
It's very difficult for us to imagine that because we don't know. I mean, it could be anybody in any size, and it could be significant for a small company to grow by $100,000 or $200,000 in a very three-person company, and it could be very incremental to have a $3 million company just grow by $100,000 or $200,000. So I'm not sure that additive effect of the total amount of economic impact is critical to the overall element as it is to have businesses individually be as successful as they can be. I know that's not a dodge, it's just I don't know that there's the right answer there.
Right, I was just looking if, when you take a deeper dive, if you would have a percentage maybe of growth. I think maybe, I guess you can't guarantee that, but if I was a business going in and I would say, yes, I'm learning this, and guess what, you can expect to have a 5% growth in your revenue, that might entice me a little more to join too.
Yeah, mathematically, we do know that if you're growing, again, depending on the size of the corporation, but most corporations look at the FTEs related to their top-line revenue sourcing. So if their revenue is X, they have a certain amount of full-time equivalents, and if their revenue goes up, they need to have more full-time equivalents that are added into the bottom line. But the different industries have different FTE revenue requirements. So I don't know that it's fair for me to even equivocate not only the economic impact, but full-time equivalent or the job generation impact that we have on that across the board, across all of the industries.
Okay.
It's a fair analysis question. I'm a data head, so I would love to know that, but it's a challenging one to predict.
Okay, that's all I have.
I wanted to just add something to, because, is that okay?
I can wait, it's okay.
Thank you so much. No, because one of the things I was thinking about, and some of the things that came up last time from the committee was the sustainability, and are we catching as many companies as we can, and is this going to be ongoing? And I think by taking this model, I think that's what you've done, is you've answered that sustainability question. And while there's concern about what the initial selection will be, the model itself lends itself that if you don't get in the first year, maybe you get in the second year, or even with the leadership of Greater McHenry County, they don't take everybody that applies. They get a lot of people who apply, and they narrow that down to the people they think that would be good for the program and could succeed with that program. So I think this really does get at the sustainability question that we were really concerned about, and just keeping in mind that not everyone will be served the first time out, but the fact that it's going to be there for them to try again the following year is great. So nailing down some of these numbers would be good, the criteria, but I think I appreciate the model that you brought back.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm in the sustainability paragraph. I would think that last line would be the 2024 consultant cost would be at a 50% reduction. Is that
Correct, that's the typo. Thank you.
And then, this money's coming from the Rebuild America funds, or
ARPA.
ARPA? So, if they're looking at 2024 being 120, how do we set that number? That, because these funds have to be spent by 2026? So, will we think this thing is going to get 213 this year, 120 next year, 120 and 25, 120, so we would be budgeting 600,000 or whatever that comes to at this point?
That was going to be my point or question, because that's not what we had
Oh,
discussed.
you can ask it then.
So your finance model doesn't quite work with what we had told you. So you're going to have to go back and rethink the sustainability of the financial model. So either you're setting yourself up lower for the first initial, or somehow you're making that financially work. So
Asking for tuition for the participation of the existing companies coming in at the later time.
again, I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just saying if you come back, because I think we had talked about potentially doing 225 roughly for the program. So that's a hard cap at 225. Sustainability, the financial model is a situation where you got to fit 225 into sustainability, that financial model going forward. So if that means you need to, I think, again, a further breakout of the financials would be very helpful, because, if I'm looking at, you have consultant fee and how that breaks out, that's, I don't want to say that's not a bad gig for the individual to do it, but that's a lot of coin up front for what that individual is going to be doing. So maybe that needs to be adjusted a little bit. You may have people in the community that would be willing to do it pro bono, LGMC individuals that want to give back. I don't know, I'm just, somehow you got to make your financial sustainability model fit, and then right now it doesn't, to Larry's point.
We'll do that.
Sorry,
That's all right.
can I finish then?
Yeah, you have at it.
Okay.
You're right on track. That's where I was going.
So some of these comments that I wrote down have already been stated, but the selection criteria for the 90 companies has already been said. We need to see what that selection criteria is. And again, for all the reasons why we've talked about, it not only provides information for the committee to agree with that selection criteria, again, with the using of the ARPA funds, there is a large component of that that is required to meet disadvantaged type situations. And so not because we want to dictate exactly what you're to do, but we are responsible for making sure that criteria fits that mold. So that's why we need to see that criteria. The other question I had is, or not question, these are comments, I guess. You made a comment that the content that this day-long series would be wrapped around would be developed by the consultant. And again, without seeing what that is, I don't necessarily need to see what that is, but somehow that should be overseen as to what that is, because if you truly do have 3 consultants, that criteria should theoretically be the same between all 3 consultants, because you don't want one cohort to get different information or maybe better or worse or whatever. So to me, the criteria by which this day-long series goes should be uniform across all 3 groups, if that's how it decides to go. We talked about that one already. Again, having an advisory board to choose the companies, I think could work, but you already have $40K at least listed in your financials for an admin cost, and I don't know where that 40K is going for admin costs, but, you know, I could see some of that admin cost going to grading the criteria against whatever matrix you decide to use. So, but if you're having an advisory board do that, then I don't know where the 40K in admin costs go. So that would be better fleshed out, I guess. In looking at the selection criteria, I think Kelly, you mentioned, or I don't remember, someone mentioned, I'm trying to understand, to me, the how you have this broken down doesn't make sense to me, in the sense that, like, you have, like, take the first one, it's Crystal Lake, Cary, and Marengo. So they are not anywhere near each other. I mean, Marengo's being out, you know, further than Crystal Lake and Cary. My concern with trying to group them into municipalities is that, you know, when you have municipalities, and I will take the last one, Algonquin, Lake and Hills, and Huntley. Well, those are some of our most populous municipalities. So if we're only selecting 30 from those, that, you know, you may end up getting 100 from those three, and now you're only choosing 30, and you may end up getting, you know, let's say 60 from another, but now you're only picking 30, so they get a 50% chance of winning. To me, I like the industry's thought process better, or just simply not have a criteria by which, where they're coming from. You have a criteria set up based on what you're trying to meet, and any businesses can compete for that, no matter where they're located in the county. I mean, I don't personally have a issue with if the criteria is established and we as a committee say that criteria is great, and if theoretically all 90 businesses came from Crystal Lake, then so be it. That's where they all came from. I mean, I don't think that's statistically possible, but conceptually, it's the criteria that's more important than where the businesses are actually located.
That's a very good suggestion, I understand.
So that's that. And I had one more. Well, this kind of goes back to the criteria, but when you are marketing the fact that this is out there, I'm going back to the state just opened up another, I don't know what they called it this time, but it's another grant application through the state that you could go through. And so I received emails from, you know, several different entities. So I received an email from the SBA, I received an email from DECO. So, you know, those sources were great at sending me as a business owner an email saying, hey, this grant application's out there. This is all the criteria by which, you know, you can apply, or if you meet this criteria, then we suggest you apply. And to me, that was very effective because you know, there's been times where I've had other emails with other applications and I don't meet the criteria. So it's like, I don't need to waste my time, you know, even opening up or trying to go to that site. So on the marketing side, that was extremely helpful as a business owner to be able to weed out what is worth my time or not worth my time. And there's ones where it's like, well, you can win up to $1,000 or get a grant of $1,000, and I look at it and say it's not even worth my time for $1,000. So again, the outcome of what you're trying to achieve would be great along with the criteria.
So I think, just in response to the last comment, is that we supply DCEO with a bunch of that curated information to make sure that the businesses of our local region are represented for their distribution. We find that to be more effective than them sending us something, and then we send it out to the group. So we try to curate that list to make sure that businesses are notified of the NOFOs, notice of funding opportunities that are available to the state, and we would use that same criteria for distribution in this opportunity as well.
I had a couple more questions. Is any part of this already offered through the Illinois Small Business Development Center, an MCC? Okay. And are there any grants available for this type of training?
Ultimately, I think we could, the grants are never for startup programming. So fundamentally, once we get the program up and running, then there could be eligibility through other programming, either through the state or through the feds. But every criteria for existing government program, and for those of you who've been involved in this know that you can't start a program with a grant. You have to be an existing program and then apply for capacity building or for other model building that's within the grant criteria. So ultimately, we would look at those as opportunities in the future, but they're not opportunities at the beginning stages of the development of the process.
And then one more follow-up. With the changes in technology and how rapidly it changes, how would you deal with that from year to year?
We've talked to the consultants, broad sense of consultants, and they indicate that there's probably a level, we'll have to develop this, and I don't want to cloud the area about getting this program started, but the alumni group that comes through these things, we think can form a larger group of alumni that stay up to date and recognize and know each other and become their own fraternity of activity that goes on. And it's my goal that maybe we have lunch and learns and other activities that sort of come out of that is self-developed, self-organized, and it's, again, like LGMC, they have a group of people that like each other and know each other and now cohort each other, and they stay supportive of the various activities that go on throughout the region. We also could formalize it if it becomes a very formal process, and we also could push some of this through the local chambers of commerce as they become more knowledgeable about how to do those criteria, because they're in the education businesses in an important way.
Okay, and I bet somebody asked this, but I just didn't recognize it. You'll have competing companies. How will you choose which of the competing competitors will be able to participate?
Could you elucidate just a little bit on that, Terry?
Sure, they're going after the same market.
Yeah.
And so how would you discern which of those companies would be able to participate?
Well, they're going to pick, part of the question is whether they participate. If they have such proprietary information, they may not want to participate in the public development forum. But as Ed said in the last meeting, this is trying to expand the market beyond just the local footprint of what they serve. This is trying to regionalize or nationalize their sales component. And to the extent that they're competing then against a firm in Texas or a firm in any other place is part of the adventure of being in business and part of the competitive process. So it's our goal to be able to give them the tools. They're going to be able to decide how the competition works for, with their proprietary information. And I do believe, we talked to a bunch of the breweries in the region, or a couple of the breweries in the region, and they could be seen as competitors, or they could be seen as joining together as entertainment venues that are common in certain ways. So it's my hope that they see each other both as friendly competitors and as compatriots.
So I know you guys work closely with the Community Foundation. I think they're going to be having some new opportunities for grants for startups, so startup projects. So just something to keep in mind.
We meet on Friday with them.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the alert.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you much.
If you want to give a 2-minute for 11.3 Economic Development Corporation, it seems how you're here, you can give a 2-minute update real quick. But
Sorry to interrupt, but it seems like they were coming to us to see if they should move forward with this. And did we really give them that direction, or did we just ask a bunch of questions? Is that true? You were sort of like, hey, are we on the right track? Should we keep moving forward with
No,
this?
we're going to invest a lot of money and time into being able to perfect this program. And it's my hope that I heard a lot of constructive comments forward. But Larry, to your point, if people don't think that we should be doing this, then we shouldn't invest the time and the money.
That's sort of
I didn't hear anyone say that this was off track, so that's why I didn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You feel if they're comfortable with that?
Yeah, I mean, I do have a lot of qualms about it, but I didn't necessarily know how to I don't know, part of it is having to like the fees, the expenses, you talked to this point, that you're not sure about all the costs associated with this. You know, if in the end, if it seems to me like it's too expensive for what I think they can accomplish, then it would be wasted time if the community members agree that like, oh, this isn't actually what we want to spend this much money on.
I guess I'm at it, conceptually, I think this would be good for county businesses, so that's what I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Again, comments and questions were to give them some guidance, leadership, whatever you want to call it, so that they can develop this more thoroughly to bring back to us. That's what I kind of took from this situation.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm fine.
and I'm fine with that too. I just thought that maybe we needed to make sure there was a consensus that they were to move forward with this, put their time and efforts into it.
You know, I think that's a good point, right? Because maybe, right, trying to assess where we are at on this, I do have concerns. You have your concerns, but you think they'll be overcome, is how I'm interpreting your comment.
It's up to them to do it.
No, I think Larry's point was, how likely are we to agree to this? Was that your point?
Yeah?
Yeah, my point is, I don't know if I'll agree to it.
Let's just go around. Get a
Let's
consensus.
just go around.
Well, I have a comment to make before we go around. And with all due respect, to me, it's trying to create a program to qualify for ARPA funds.
Right.
And I felt that those funds were really better served going to capital investment, you know, some of the serious issues that we've got in the program. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's anything organic that was in existence and this became available, so it was an option to, you know, make it viable. It was created to get these funds, and that's a turnoff for me.
Oh,
On the other hand, there's been other programs that have been initiated because these funds are available, so.
Well, we've got a lot of.
I think there's many brand new, like what am I thinking of? Independence Health and Therapy, are they the ones that came with asking for money for,
Their new program.
yeah, so. I think it's okay if it's a new program, I just would like to see further what
But it
they're
was
talking
created
about.
for this purpose. The other program was something that they were doing, and they looked at this as possible funding. So that was the difference. And then we know some of these capital programs that need funding. And so, you know, to say to the people in Oakwood Hills, we think this is better with those funds, I guess we'd have to go back and look at what was the purpose of those funds.
I think that this is a great use of funds. I think the fact of the matter is that the whole ARPA funds was in reaction to the COVID situation, correct? And that was the economic downturn and the challenges associated in economics. The EDC is uniquely positioned to be able to utilize funds to help to grow the economy locally, not just to move us out of some of the challenges we've had, but to move us well into the future. And it's all about growth of funds, growth of opportunities, growth of capacity, so that in fact we are building the overall economy so that perhaps, who knows, but perhaps we can even withstand greater challenges that might come forward in the future. So I think that, frankly, I don't care whether this was done in response or whether this was done as a capital need that already existed. I don't care, because I'm looking at what this is going to do to strengthen our local economy through our local businesses. I can't think of anything that's more appropriate.
That's a valid point. Valid point.
Yeah.
I guess I would just echo that. And I know that you guys have been talking about it. I think there was the picnic last year. So this is something that I think you had talked about, that you had seen some of the challenges that small businesses were facing. And I guess the last time you were here, when you talked a little bit more about it, I guess I wasn't aware that you weren't already working with local businesses, but that this wasn't, that you were positioned to maybe provide some assistance to that area of our economy. And if we are talking about that many small businesses, and to your point, I don't even know what percentage it is of our total economy, but, you know, obviously it's significant, and, you know, and so it is important that that we help this sector of our economy. And it was kind of and so in other words, I think you've been thinking about this for a long time, and it came out of the numbers you saw through the pandemic and what had happened to some of these businesses. And as they were recovering, they weren't incorporating new skills to beyond some of the same things they were doing pre-COVID, so that if we go through this again, many of these companies are going to have the same issues all over again. And so this is kind of just positioning and helping our overall economy to be more resilient in the future. So I guess I'm perfectly fine with moving this forward.
One of the things I think we have to be careful of is we as a committee shouldn't get too much into the weeds in terms of what they're doing.
Right,
And so
right.
I think we've done enough of that. I think, to Larry's point, we just have to say, are we comfortable with expenditure of funds in support of a program that is generally now scripted by EDC?
Yeah. So I think we-
Good?
I'm comfortable with them moving forward with this, but there's some reserve, as mentioned, until we get some of these answers, details, if you
Yep.
will. But I think it's worthwhile to pursue.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm on board.
Okay.
As long as we get those details, and maybe those are details we'll have to massage, iron out a little bit as we move along, right?
Okay, so 2-minute update?
2-minute update on the general economics of the region. We have about 3.9% unemployment according to our numbers. The numbers that are provided by the state are a little bit behind the curve on that. We have, for the most part, we've had a difficulty getting our 18 to 23-year-olds moving into the marketplace. We're seeing that now be a little more aggressive. Many of the businesses in the region have altered their recruitment and workforce practices to be more accommodating to the Gen Z crowd coming in. The Manufacturing Pathways program that we initiated, a group of us initiated way back, has now targeted some of those females with families moving back into the workforce and 18 to 23-year-olds moving into the workforce. And as you recall, the 18 to 23-year-olds, the 22, 21, 23-year-olds didn't have job fairs, didn't have workplace internships, didn't have shadowing opportunities because of the pandemic profile. So we're seeing some absorption in those areas right now. As far as the building and structures go in the region, we've got about 250,000 square feet of finished spec space in the region, with absorption ratios at about 400,000. So we're short on the availability of speculative space. Many business leadership are coming to us saying, I'd like to be able to move in the fall or early winter, and that criteria is not available to us based on construction material and labor costs, labor availability and timing. It looks like the earliest people will be able to move into spec space is second quarter 2024. So we're out about 14 months at least to be able to get people, and that's generally speaking not what C-suite execs or business owners are looking to hear. So the benefit, it's not a benefit, the reality is that everyone has the same problem. So we're not losing these clients that want to move to the McHenry market to other areas that are more ready in other ways. This is the new reality of the availability of space. Most of the big developers that we deal with on a week-to-week basis are saying they're really not looking at any construction additions to the 23 formula that they have. They're looking all at 24 and early 25, first quarter 25.
So to clarify, that the people coming in, the 400,000 square feet needed, are people coming into the county?
That's
or
correct.
New employers?
Right, new employers coming to the region. And so we're trying to, for the lack of a better term, we're trying to keep them on the hook as we go along, as they do the evaluation and criteria for the rest of the region. Our numbers look pretty good from a workforce development standpoint, tax place standpoint, availability of green space, domestic supply chain, and then the distribution supply chains that come out of the other end of that. So we're feeling pretty good about our positioning strategy. As far as the municipalities go, for those of you that have been tracking with the information I've been producing in some of the different newsletters and supply chain information that we put out, we've got about 2,500 new housing units coming up this year, 2,500 entitlements put together for 24. That's about 8,000 people per year that are coming out of that are moving from other area. Now, I'm not sure I can validate in a public meeting this type of thing. When you talk to the ownership of the existing subdivisions that are getting built, a great portion of them are coming from southern Wisconsin and Lake County as relocation decisions. So a portion of that population increase is coming from a 50-mile swing, usually from those two locations as a percentage of it. And then there's a great number of people that come from other locations as well. And it's because of quality of life and livability issues, and we go a little deeper. We haven't done the big research project, but we are looking at what is attractive to them. And of course, it's the traditional things like schools, access to retail, and easy transportation to their jobs. But a third and fourth element include the access to conservation district and open space activities and outdoor activities as a high livability standard. And one of the things that surprised us but is interesting is modern government. And that term is not defined to me, but I think that means that you have an ability to pay your water bill online, that you have easy communication with your public elected officials. I'm not sure what this is, but to some people, they've moved from a community that has less modern features in their government presentation. We'll dig deeper into that as appropriate. And lastly on this, as we look at economic growth throughout the region, our GDP is looking pretty solid. Our relationship to the Greater Chicago Economic Partnership, which is the other 6 counties, the 7-county region, has matured. We started on January 1st being full partners, and we've started to do projects together like reduce the tolls on the Long Meadow Parkway area. We had Cook County, King County, McHenry County all coming together to lobby to try to increase the funding and reduce the toll impact of that particular location. We've also done a bunch of economic activities, and we currently have 3 deals on the floor. They're significant deals. And just to use an example, we're having all of our institutional workforce guys do a 30-second video, and then we're showing our international friends, the potential businesses that would move here, that we have a coordinated effort among the various education facilities to show that trained workers will be available for them as they move into the marketplace. In one case, it's 1,700 workers, of which 1,200 of those workers are skilled workers, and that is the biggest question they want to resolve, is will I have a pipeline of workers over the years to come, and are your institutions organized in being able to have a pipeline of people that we can hire in order to fulfill our productivity obligations. So I'm letting you know that's working well. We're working in that capacity fairly well. We also work with the R1 group, which is Boone, McHenry, and Winnebago counties, which is the Rockford marketplace. And we're working in that particular area to help logistics and transportation in addition to a whole bunch of other things. But as you know, the Rockford Airport has tripled in size for freight and transfer areas, and we're seeing as much freight from the western side of McHenry County go to Rockford as the eastern side goes to the O'Hare freight terminal systems. And that situationally is very promising for our 2390 exchange, which you can go 30 minutes either direction in order to be able to provide that outbound distribution and inbound supply chain. So, Mr. Chairman, that's probably a little more than my 3 minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Better than I would have done for my segment, so it's all good. Okay.
Can I just ask?
The space that you were talking about, that 14-month delay, is that pretty much regionally what you're seeing?
Chicagoland is 14 months. When you get into Texas, it's 18 months, and when you go into some other states, it's even further out.
Yeah. Okay.
And it has to do mostly with material supply and mostly with steel.
Yeah.
So a majority of our steel comes from overseas, and we can't get that supply chain greenlight.
Okay.
I did have a question on that. The new specs you talk about, there was a request for 400,000
Speculative space, yes.
space, right? Is all of that new construction, I mean, is there any ability to reconvert existing space that's no longer being used? I don't know exactly all the different, what they're using it for, but.
Yeah, so we have 2 different categories of adaptive space. One is adaptive space, taking B or C rate buildings and turning them into more productive space. And then there's adaptive reuse space, which is taking a building that was built for single purpose and then adaptively using it for something else. Think about a hospital is built as a hospital, now how can you convert that into some other component? We've been working with many of those different areas. The challenge in most of those is most of the businesses are moving out of older space and they want new space as a decision. And I don't know if this is a fair analogy or not, but many people move out of their old house and want new houses as part of their criteria for their selection. I would say businesses aren't unlike that in some situations. So it's a market-driven issue, not just we'd like to see the space adaptively reused. That's a good question.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We're on to 10.2 budget discussion. I asked this to be added to the agenda for two reasons. One, I've gotten a lot of feedback in regard to departments coming forward to the liaison committees and what is being presented at those committees. And because that will start happening very shortly here, I wanted to have a discussion with the committee in regard to what should those presentations look like. I've gotten feedback in the past that the presentations that were given were a waste of time, not because of what was being presented, but just because the committee felt like it wasn't a good use of time based on what was being presented. So I'm trying to set the table so that Pete or Carrie or whoever can go back to the department heads and elected officials and set an expectation level as to what gets presented at committee level. So for those that are new to the board, Brian just walked out, but
You still have Terry.
yeah, basically what was done in the past was a department would come forward with their budget. They would present highlights from the previous year, goals for the next year. They would present their budget on a very high level as far as if they were, most of them all came back with basically a zero-based budget in the sense that it was the same as last year outside of personnel. And then if there was any supplemental requests that they were going to be making, they would present the supplemental request. And that was, but that always took, in some cases, 30 minutes for a department to give that presentation. Yeah, and we have 27 departments, 28 departments, whatever the hell it is. So, I mean, it's a lot of time spent in different committees. And you know, like at finance, we would have 5 or 6 on the agenda in one meeting. So meetings became very long. So I'm trying to better refine and define what they should be presenting. And I'm having a discussion here to see what you guys feel is what's important and what committee members need to know and have for a budget.
We have a department head meeting next Friday, so 8 days. And Carrie and I will be kind of the unofficial launch of the budget season. And I know folks are working on it already, but to the extent that we're going to modify how we're doing these presentations, that would be a good time for us to communicate. Everyone's kind of has a standard practice now, as Mike articulated. They go over the accomplishments of last year and goals for next year, and it's the 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 series budgets all rolled up, and where they go over, those are what we really focus on at those budget meetings and why.
But that's not necessarily what they focus on at presentation to the committee.
We tell them, and it's their opportunity to talk with board members about their office, their department.
Right. So does anyone, I guess, first, did I portray what has occurred in the past correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So is there a feeling like we want to continue having that again, or should we make modifications to it?
So sometimes it feels like in the discussions, it's not just what they've accomplished and what's coming up, it's what their department does. And I don't think we need to reminder of what that department does. That's something we should already know, I would hope.
We can stop it there. You're right, and especially because we kind of have done that with the new board coming on, in January, February, March. We did that. This is what we do, presentation to every standing committee.
Right, so we don't need, unless they're changing, and unless they want a different head count, I don't think we need to see their org chart and all of the information about the
Okay.
department. I would like to see a quick recap of their major accomplishments, especially if there's something that we have passed a resolution to give them money for, and their goals. But unless it's something that's completely different than in the past, I mean, I would rather focus more on the money.
I agree, but
Yeah, I like what Kelly said about that. We don't need to go through their whole, what they do, but we need a flow chart, a work chart if they're going to change personnel or looking for more personnel.
Right.
Otherwise, we don't necessarily need it now.
But, I mean, I'm echoing these, but also, I mean, they could highlight where they've saved money or where, maybe we don't want to point this out, but where they've lost money. So like over.
we never lose it, we just spend it.
You spend it differently, yes. Where different expectations. I mean, I think when I was a new board member, it wasn't clear to me that at the committee level, I don't decide whether or not I'm approving. I don't, in planning development, I don't decide whether or not planning and development department gets their supplementals. That wasn't a discussion point, right? So in finance, you had said to me earlier that in finance, we do go over the supplementals in this committee and decide which ones we're going to support or not support. But
Well, the list is presented to us so that we can have a discussion.
here, yeah, but at the other 6 committees, they don't decide whether, they don't really have input as to what supplementals are going to go forward or not go forward. And that wasn't clear to me as a new board member. So I remember 2 years ago, I emailed, probably Peter and Kevin, so the CFO, the administrator, saying, do I need to do some work on what I want to pass or not pass? And the answer was no. And I do not need to do work on which supplementals I like and don't like. That's not something that happens at the committee level.
Well, so again, thought process,
Yeah.
is it better to simply have, instead of having all the presentations in all the committees, is it better to just have a committee of the whole where if a department has changes to their budget, personnel-wise
Yeah.
or supplementals or whatever it is, that gets presented to all of us at the same time in a forum where it gets done versus at committee level. Again, going back to the discussion I had, I think it was last month, about how to think about how we're going to pass a budget this year. To me, the more information that all the board members can have, the better off we are going to be as a collective governing body. And, my concern is, and this has been public already, so, public health, right? So health department is requesting additional 2.5 million.
Mental health.
Mental health, sorry. What did I say? Public health?
Yeah.
Mental health, yeah, sorry. You're over here freaking out, I'm sorry. Alyssa's like, really? I did?
I'll take $2.5 million more, sure.
Sorry, my mistake. So, that's a big ask, and to me, you're gonna have 7 members who are gonna hear that, are gonna know the information pertaining to it. So either I make myself available to go to that meeting to ask questions, or how else do I get that? So to me, that's an anomaly, because that's a big ask, which doesn't normally happen. But again, I'm looking at process, and just because that's an anomaly doesn't mean that maybe we should change the process to deal with it all together. I know transportation is, asking for a large increase for their capital stuff. Again, so that's going to be heard at transportation and why that gets justified. But again, all the rest of us should know that and understand the implications of either saying yes or no to that increase. So this is what keeps me awake at night, so.
Yeah, now to that point, right, I do think that if the things we're actually going to decide about, like any department that's is not asking for a raise in their budget, you know, we're proud of them and we want to hear from them, but we don't need to take their time for them to tell us how they're perfect and they're our favorite department, right? I do think it's helpful for the whole board to hear supplementals that we're going to have to decide on. So if we're going to, in this budget season, start saying, no, we're not going to give this much money to this area or that area, and we're going to get into the details as a board, then we probably should hear these supplemental requests at a cow.
Can I just make sure I understand what you're saying? So you're saying in the case of transportation where they're going to be asking for a big increase in capital equipment, that we wouldn't hear that and decide what's going to the cow, that we would put that work onto the cow?
What I'm saying is so currently transportation would go to transportation committee and present their budget. As part of that budget, they would be requesting an additional, was it $500,000 or whatever that dollar amount is for capital equipment. And that would be going forward. So it's not just a 1-year supplement, it's a continuing funding it at a different level. So what I'm saying is that supplemental.
Would that come to us from the transportation committee?
It won't come to us.
Okay.
It will eventually get put on a list and would eventually get sent to a committee of the whole meeting where we would see that up on the screen, but the whole presentation as to why that came about, the full board wouldn't hear, only the transportation members would have heard.
Well, technically, you could listen. I mean, but if you're right, to your point, you'd have to go to absolutely every other committee, which is already hard to get to the 3 days.
Well, you could have, yes, you could have heard it and gone, but that's what
Right.
I'm saying. I would have to attend other committees in order to get all that.
But would there ever be a situation where it would not, like that request would not have come out of finance? In other words, it could have happened where they asked for the $500,000 and finance said, not finance, transportation, and they say no at the committee level, so that doesn't get pushed forward, or does?
It automatically gets pushed forward.
It's going to get pushed forward no matter what?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's what I'm wondering.
Well, they say at the
There
recommendation.
is Teresa's comments earlier, you know, supplementals are presented to the standing committees. I would say it's a little bit more than just review. I mean, we gauge kind of how things are received. There's a little bit of a challenge of some of those supplementals that occurs. Yes, often it is as presented, but we get to kind of feel, you know, how those supplementals are received. And sometimes the supplementals are presented maybe not with an expectation that they're going to get funded in the next fiscal year, but they're kind of like a heads up, this is coming, we're going to need this in the next few years, so just kind of educating committee members about that. That's some of the discussion that Carrie and I will have with the offices and departments, you know, as we review the budgets more closely.
See, I think what you might lose from that is that discussion that might kind of tailor it a little bit more to where, because at the county level,
This is-
got 18 people.
This is interesting, and it's a little bit different than I thought we were going to have the discussion, but I mean, you are a smaller board now,
That's true.
right? And so it is a little bit easier to be, you know, could you imagine 3 committee of the wholes in August to review?
No, I don't want that. I'm not
Okay.
trying to create more work. What I'm trying to create is information that gets disseminated to everybody.
Okay.
So I'm in transportation, right? When I walk into transportation, yes, I still have my finance hat on, but I'm really looking at it from a transportation standpoint. So when they present, hey, you know, trucks went from $250,000 up to $400,000 a truck, so that's an additional 150, and we didn't do anything. All we did was, you know, still purchase them, you know, and by the way, we need these and this and that, you know. So from a transportation hat, I'm like, yeah, I can see why we need that additional money. Now, when I come to finance, I got a different hat. Okay, I still know that we need that, but how do I fit that into a budget? So, to me, you know, you're looking at it through two different lenses. You know, I'm not gonna, at transportation, I'm not gonna sit there and get down to the sense of literally the money side of it, because that's not what that committee's for. That committee is to look at operationally, how does everything function? When it comes to the finance, that's a different story. So, but as 18 board members, we now have the responsibility for all the departments and all of the funding that's going on. And my concern is that when we go to take votes, when we go to pass a budget, if I haven't heard a presentation by transportation and they're requesting 600,000 more money, now I'm being asked to vote for it. I'm relying on perhaps the transportation committee members to say, yes, this is really needed. But wouldn't it be better if I had that information firsthand and was able to understand it?
So the discussion is how to get that information.
Well, so what I'm saying is again, I've been here for 10 plus years, right? So I have intrinsic knowledge more than other board members that just started, right? But I don't need to see, and I don't need a presentation personally on what someone's goals are for the future. To me, if I want to understand their goals, I will talk to them, or if I think they're off track or whatever. I mean, I don't need them to present it. I give it to me in a piece of paper and I can read it.
Yeah.
I don't need to hear the highlights from the past year. I mean, to me, presentations should be about things that either have gone wrong, that need to be corrected, that as a policymaker I can help with, or things that they know are coming up that they need my help with.
Well, and to your point,
Carrie's got to jump out pretty quick. Can she do her update?
Yes, I'm
quickly?
sorry, we have a call with Microsoft, that's very important.
Oh, I didn't know that, okay.
I thought we'd be talking,
All right, what do you wanna,
So I guess for the ARPA.
when's your call, at 10?
Yeah.
Oh, so in 30 seconds, great. Go ahead. You got 30 seconds left.
It is an important call. We're
That's fine.
trying
Yeah.
to save a lot of money on our licenses.
So Carrie J, she's on the call, so I don't steal all her thunder. We kind of inherited, well, not inherited, we jumped into the ARPA project when it was almost finished. So we have been working on trying to get our arms around, where we're at, what was approved, and then now that it's kind of rolling, like what's being spent. So she put together this worksheet, and I can email it out to you too. It's the public projects, and then there's also a tab for the internal projects, just so you can see what's been approved, and then more importantly, what they've spent. So we can kind of monitor what percentage of their project they're covering.
So do you wanna save this for next month and go over this in more detail next month?
You know what, and I can email it to you guys before the meeting, so then if you have any specific questions, or
Okay.
if you want to see something different. But I thought it was a good way to kind of see on one sheet, where we're at as far as spending.
This is great.
It's great.
Yeah,
Thank you, thank you.
okay.
That's good.
Carrie.
Go ahead, go hop on your call.
Good luck with your call. Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
I agree with what you're saying when it comes to the presentations, because people are gonna come in with different views. You've been on transportation, so I'm just gonna use the things we've talked about. So you'll come in and say, we need these new trucks, we need this increased budget. Somebody else may have gone to another meeting and say, well, we need this. And you're gonna have two different views because you've been exposed to more different information. And the best is to have everybody have all the information so we can all be making an educated decision on it instead of having conflict.
Me?
Yeah.
When I hear what was just said, it was like the cow would be the way to go, so everybody's getting the same information. Which I don't disagree with, but with the inflationary pressures we've had the last couple of years, what department is not going to be looking for something extra? So now we have all the departments coming to the cow, or if we don't have all the departments coming to the cow, are we gonna say, you got 600,000, you need more, so you get to come to the cow, but only because you're only hiring one more person, you don't?
No, so here's where I'm coming from. We got rid of the terminology in our budget policy of supplemental, implying that it's fuel cost, it's just costing more. Meaning fuel cost went from $3 to $4 and now the budget line item increased. Before that was considered a supplemental. We're not calling that a supplement anymore because it's still the same. We went back to the fuel saying, you know, you use 1 million gallons, you're using 1 million gallons again this year, the cost is what the cost is. So we got rid of that, and we're not talking about personnel as far as unless they're wanting to hire an additional person. So to me, that's something that would come to a committee of the whole meeting if that's what is decided, because that's an additional person, no different than right now, you know, out of budget cycle, someone comes and says, we want to hire, like Shannon came and said she wanted another half-time person so she could hire a full-time person. You know, she went through the process to get that accomplished outside of the budget cycle. So if someone wants to do that, then they would present that also. My envision is that based on past history, there shouldn't be that many things that get presented at a committee of the whole. Now, how long something takes, meaning i.e. mental health coming saying they want 2.5 million, that discussion could take an hour. I can't control that aspect of it, but I don't think there's going to be more than maybe 15 or 20 things that would be on that list that would come to a committee of the whole, and some things may not need to be discussed, you know.
It seems to me that every department, because of the inflation, is going to be asking for more money, and so who gets to present their case and who doesn't get to present their case if you're not going to let them all come, all the departments present at the cow with their details. I mean, that just seems at some level we need to trust the decision made at the committee level.
And again, that's why I'm having the discussion. I'm trying to flush this out. I'm trying to make use of board members' time and staff time efficient. That's ultimately the goal.
I get that, and I think the cow, so everybody has the same information is a good idea, but I'm just really concerned that there's, and maybe Peter can help with this. Is there some departments that are going to say, hey, we're status quo, we don't care?
Yeah, there will be.
I mean,
Yeah, there will be. I mean, we know there will be growth in personnel costs, absolutely, and we were going to account for some just inflationary growth in utilities and contracts and fuel. So, you know, I just pull, you know, I look recorder's office. I don't expect that they're going to have any supplementals that I'm aware of. You know, even county administration, I don't know if we're going to have any supplemental requests. But I think what you're saying, Mike, is that number one, we'll have leaner presentations at the committee level, right? We can say you get 15 minutes, focus on the money. Don't tell us what you do. Tell us what, you know, what was different last year or next year, something like that. But then maybe, if you recall, when we bring the supplementals forward, and we do have a special meeting already scheduled, I think, for around or about September 28th or 30th.
But that's not supplemental, that's complete budget.
And that's when we would do the supplementals too.
Well, yeah, that would, but it's more than just supplementals. Okay.
Well, we could use that meeting, or we could use another. We could use the standard September cow meeting. We will have a list of supplementals, and particularly it's the general fund ones that have to compete with one another that are the most. We could have everybody present their supplemental requests, and that probably would be in that neighborhood of 15 to 20, maybe, but it's only 6 or 8 departments historically.
So when you say supplements, because you're saying you're getting rid of that, so when you say each department that has to have supplements, is that for the
A new person,
those kinds of things. So when you say you already account for inflation, you know, so where is that getting accounted for in this discussion? Because I know what's coming before us is what is needed in these departments above and beyond what they've done, but you still have this.
we'll have that discussion here and with administrative services in the coming months, labor costs and insurance costs. We don't ask our offices and departments to fill in that. We do that for them.
Right. So then that discussion is also though a separate discussion about where that's going. Is it, and that you're saying that that's here and.
Well, no, we don't. So if Department X, so that's why I'm saying, their department budget is the same as last year outside of personnel, so that's why I made that caveat, because personnel are either under contract, union contract, or they're non-union, and, we approve a increase for them, usually, which is equivalent to, union. So, to me, that's outside a department's true budget. You can't, I don't want to say you can't control that, but I mean, in essence, that's what that is. So, if their budget was $1 million last year and it's $1 million this year outside of personnel,
yes,
then
right.
Again, that's great. It's not like I don't want to applaud them and say, congratulations, thank you for doing a great job and keeping control on costs, but.
And we will have those.
Right, you will.
We will have those. And even, there could be even a little bit of growth by 3-year contracts that had kickers in year 2 or year 3 that we agreed on that.
Right, but again, if the board's already agreed on something, I don't need to present it all over again.
I agree.
Yeah. See, it was already presented, I agree.
I mean, there will be.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and this is what you're saying, from what I'm hearing. I think that it's really important when we look at planning and budgeting, that we understand that personnel has to be a unique situation, because we're going to have to grow in personnel. We're also going to have to deal with the organization and the negotiations going with those organizations. So I think that that has to be separate, and we need to have a separate report coming to this committee for that, for discussion purposes. But I think that's the exclusion. I think otherwise we have to be planning for a certain amount of growth, inflationary growth or whatever. We just say that's what it is. The staff in their budgeting process, they go ahead and accept that. We don't have to hear anything else from any of the departments or from the committees with regards to that. However, there's going to be, and whatever it might be in terms of a policy decision, but there's going to be those areas where we're going to have an additional consideration of above and beyond. Whether you call that supplementals, whether you don't call that supplementals, I don't really care. But what it is we say, okay, if there's going to be an increase, just to pull the figure here that says, okay, anything above 5% more than the standard inflationary increase that has been agreed upon, then that needs to come before this committee, whether that is for equipment costs, whether that is for construction overruns or whatever it might be. Anything like that needs to come to us for us to understand before it goes to the committee of the whole. But I think we just need to set whatever that level is, and that's fine. Then everybody's treated the same. We're all there on the same page. We know what we're talking about, and we review those things.
Again, I hear what you're saying, it's just, that would be a change from how things are currently operating.
Well, sometimes, we got to
And
move
that's
forward.
fine, and that's why I'm bringing this up. I am encouraging us to look at things differently, so that's, Ultimately, what I'm trying to get from the committee today is, what does Pete tell the department heads and the elected officials about what they're presenting to committees? If at all, what is being presented? And that's what I'm trying to, because that's immediately what needs to happen.
I got some good direction on
Yeah,
that.
I was gonna say, I think you summarized it pretty well.
Yeah. But I do think we need to flesh out a little bit more what does September look like on review of additions to the budget, right?
Yep.
And that's what I'm here, we've got some ideas, but we haven't quite finalized that.
and that's fine. To me, the immediate thing is they're gonna start coming before our committees in July and August, and I want that to look either different or, so.
Okay. Leaner, quicker, focus on what's different, and of course supplementals, but then we start to inventory those supplementals. We will have that list. How we review that collectively with the whole board is, I think, what we need to answer.
I think it's also important to note, this might make it a little bit longer, but if we passed a resolution saying for an additional person in public health, how that has benefited. So, or, something, not like how an extra air conditioner works better, but, something that's a significant change.
Okay.
I don't know, is everybody okay?
Changes from
with that?
last year.
Just so we know how the money's working from the past year?
Personally, I don't get a benefit out of that. I mean, to me, if it's working, then it's great. If it's not working, then I'd rather know about it if it's not working,
But they hired another person and it changes their budget or don't change their budget? Does that matter? I mean,
well, any person that gets hired changes their budget.
it changes what they're spending, but I don't know, we hire people and they say, well, we can put this halftime within what their current budget. So does that budget change from last year or next year? If it doesn't change the budget and they're still with the same amount of people and we've already passed it, then we don't really need to hear about it. If they had a budget of 2 million and they hired an extra person and are coming back looking for 2.1 million, then maybe we need to hear about it. I'm more of a question than an answer here.
If it went from 2 to 2.1, then yeah, I'd want to hear about it.
Okay.
If it went from 2 million that stayed at 2 million, then no, I don't need to
But
hear
if we
about it.
already passed it and they were within their budget to put that person on board,
Yeah,
it's just the same budget, so it doesn't matter.
right.
That's happened, right?
That happens all the time.
I guess I'm thinking of like major projects.
Okay.
A major change. We have a new sheriff's. A lot of stuff going on in the sheriff's office.
So, so a question, are you thinking of incorporating that idea about, where there's some kind of agreement? Because I think to get to your point, if you have that kind of an agreement that there's going to be a certain amount of increase due to inflation and everything else, then if we're really looking at things that are above and beyond that, that's assuming you're gonna get the board to agree to capturing that increase as opposed to decreasing it. And so,
I'm not intending to have an across-the-board inflationary increase on commodities.
right, because I know they could make adjustments and other things, and so it's
Yeah.
really,
I mean, we can ask, they can demonstrate why they absolutely can't get it done, but I'm not gonna just start this
There
process.
isn't an assumption that
but it's not
that's,
an
everybody
assumption that
gets
everyone's
3%
getting
more.
that, right,
No.
sure, okay, well then that's all I was saying, is
Except for labor.
Right.
That's why we don't ask them to budget for labor.
I think that's logical. I mean, some years we just say, okay, it's gotta be flat. I mean, this is what it is.
It's called the maintenance budget.
Yeah.
And it's getting tougher and tougher,
Right.
and we're gonna hear
But,
about it.
but at some point, you're gonna have to increase it, right?
It's-
And so across the board, we're gonna provide the departments the opportunity to move forward, because we have to do that. But then there's gonna be those exceptions, like the cost of equipment. Whether we like it or not, equipment's going up, so that's gonna take us well
That's
beyond.
what
as you've
Gary's
already
doing right
stated.
now. Microsoft, what they wanna do to us.
Right, so those are the exceptions. Those are the things that I wanna hear about.
I have a question. When we're looking at budgeting, does it ever come down to what is the purpose of this department? Are they meeting their purpose? Are these things that are mandated and must be done? Or are they providing additional things that are nice to have? Does it get into that level of detail when there's?
all the time.
Okay, all right. That's
Yep,
legitimate.
we, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we talked about when we were really trying to figure out how to cut, what services are we providing that we don't have to provide?
Mhm.
And do we want to still continue to provide that? So, yeah, Yes?
On that note, though, what service will be provided or provided from that department? Yet you're saying do we really need to hear what they're doing and what they're gonna do in the future? We sort of would miss out on some of that information, wouldn't we?
Only if they're providing services that they don't have to provide.
We don't know what services they provide, how would we know that?
Why wouldn't you know what services they
Well,
provide?
if, I'm trying to think, like, someone comes in and gives a chart, we had the water resource thing, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to do this, and that's why we need to have this budget. And then was there something on that chart that if we didn't see their presentation, would we say, how would we know, okay, well, we don't need to do that? I'm not saying, explaining that very clearly, am I?
Do I have that blank look like?
Well, I'll jump on that then, because
Okay.
I think that, yes, you've been here 10 years, but it's even after a year, you're sitting here going, okay, I don't really remember everything they do in this department. And not that we need, because I know, by the time we get these presentations, we are like numb, right? Because there's just a lot of information. But just that review every year, what they're doing and why they need certain things, I do think is helpful. I still learn something every time they come forward with what they're doing.
And
It's
again,
after a year, and so I think it's just,
yeah.
it takes time to get up to speed.
So what are you saying, Larry?
Well, you said, when Terry talked, you said that happens all the time, but what I heard from you is if we make a leader presentation, we're not gonna hear some of that stuff. I am in favor of the leaner presentation, don't get me wrong. I mean, everybody's time is important. But I don't know how we hear that stuff if we cut too much of it out.
Well, Larry, what I'm thinking is if somebody comes and they're at or below their previous budget, fine, we don't need to hear all that. When somebody comes and they're very aggressively seeking more money, that's when we can ask a question of what's really going on, what act controls that part of the organization that they are mandated to do things versus they've created things that are outside what their original mandate was, and how well are they managing that? Do they have modeling in place to show what their plan is, that can support, the different variables that we've gone. And I mean, really get down into it, because they're asking people to reach into their pockets and take money out of other funds to cover that in many cases. So that's where we really, I'd rather spend the time on something like that versus they've done a great job, they're at or below, and they're doing amazing things, working smarter, more economically. That's great. That's not the purpose of the budgeting process, is for them to get kudos. Just make a list and give them kudos.
Not kudos,
February.
but if they're doing a great job, that's fine, but
Mhm.
say in the technology, like in the recorder's office, they were able to get rid of some personnel. And they did on their own, I guess, but is there somebody that's coming in with a status quo budget that we could say, well, you don't need to be doing this now because something else has taken that spot? I don't know how much you cut out and still get all the information, that's all.
Do you look at things like that to give us a heads up, or, to basically hold people more accountable, or is that your role? Where's the
Yeah,
line
so
there?
when myself and the finance staff, we'll review things on a line-by-line basis with them in our office. And we do challenge them, if they're not staying within their financial boundaries as to why they're gonna need more. But we really open up a big discussion when we start to talk about mandated versus not mandated services, and maybe I can revisit some of our documentation on that. But Larry, you mentioned we had a wonderful presentation earlier this week on our water resources program. Most of that is not mandated. We have a water resource action plan that's great, and it's one of the leaders in the state, but you can't find statute that says we have to do that.
But if they were out of line, you know what I mean? If there was something that gave us
How
concern.
much resources we commit to them is
Right.
our discretion. The work we're doing in communications, we had administrative services yesterday, we're doing a great job in communications. We don't have have to have a communications department. It gets really,
Well, there's smart money,
you
know.
don't have
and
to have a
then
county
there's-
administrator.
I think though, something that maybe.
I'd say a bundle.
As a new board member, the budget process isn't maybe what I thought it was gonna be like. You're not gonna see a growth, when, the projects we already do, we don't go through and say they have to do this, they don't do that. If their budget's the same as last year, that includes all the stuff that they unmandated. We don't go into that.
Right, and I'm saying, and if there's
And
nothing
you
to
won't know.
cause attention, then great. But for example, Valley High, Scott's amazing modeling. That's the type of thing that if somebody came in and they were asking for a large tax increase and they didn't have that type of modeling to build or support a case, and then we'd have to be the people to, hopefully they would have listened to good advice before they came in, but what if they haven't?
What I'm saying is, I don't think you're gonna see in the budgets what you think you're gonna see. So, when they come in, they want to raise the budget, that's where someone will increase. And so, they're also saying, we need a new liner for this has already been done, but we needed a new liner for Valley High's, pot.
Mhm.
And so, we have to buy a liner, but that's a supplemental request. So it's not even like are you gonna do this thing? A lot of the supplemental requests are things that we have to do.
Right.
And so we don't go and say, well, if we're gonna get this liner, then we'll have to cut an unneeded somewhere else. We don't do that. We just say, do we need a liner? Yes, so we say yes to the liner. And some of that's already done. Like by the time it gets to the budget process, we're not actually as a board going through line by line at all.
Right.
We're just
I get that.
say, like last year it was, if we're not gonna do this, Peter and Kevin, so the CFO and the administrator, said to us, if you don't give us this money, this is what we're not gonna buy. Right, it wasn't really a question for us, what are we gonna cut? They told us what we're gonna cut.
Okay.
And we don't go in, you're not gonna see, like, so if one department says, I want the supplemental, the answer is yes or no to supplemental. It's not, you can get supplemental if you cut some other program. We don't go through their programs
Right.
at all. At that level.
We're gonna be giving them an answer, and then what goes to the cow, they're not gonna come in and try to circumvent what the finance committee has said, this is what will be presented to the cow. They're not gonna go in and try to basically override our recommendation,
Who's they?
whoever's asking for increases in their budget.
Well, it's the board that makes the decision.
Yeah,
Well, no, but the finance committee makes the recommendation.
no.
No? No?
You-
Oh, okay, this is important.
The way we've been structured and the ordinance that creates the county administrator position does just that it's our office that will present the budget. You guys will give us parameters, mostly on the revenue side. We'll make estimates on the expense side. There'll be either a shortfall or a surplus. Hopefully there's a little surplus. How we allocate that surplus is that's where most of the attention will go. We as administration and finance will challenge and tamp down as much as we can the expenses, but then there'll be a delta. There's $1.5 million left in the general fund, surplus. But we've got $3 million worth of requests. That's where the real hardest part of the budget process comes from, and that's where there will be a recommendation on that, and then it's up to you guys to challenge our recommendation.
Okay.
That's how it's been. It doesn't have to be that way. That's how it's been. And I think where this discussion has been about is how are we getting more board members' eyes on those supplemental requests earlier in the process before that's a final recommendation. And I'll accept that challenge. Mike and I can talk about that a little bit more about how to get more eyes on those requests for additional funds earlier.
Well, it's more than, yeah, I mean, it's actually understanding what the request is and why the request is being made. And to your point, Larry, you and I have sat through presentations that sounded like it was a political stump speech about why they should be reelected here. And I don't need that. I don't need to know why person X has done wonderful things. So
I agree.
that's what I'm trying to get it out of.
That's a much more straightforward thing for me to say.
That was a great way to say it.
Well-
15 words or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sums it up pretty good.
Good luck with that one.
So we're all on the same page, right?
And it's a little change, you know, we've kind of given them a little bit of a blank sheet of paper and said, hey, this is your time to come in and toot your own horn. That was, we'll change that.
You got that down.
No more to Zoom,
No
man.
more to
No more horn tooting.
You could maybe write it to us in a piece of paper, right? That's what they're gonna do.
Okay. Thank you for everyone for that. Reports. So did Carrie have anything else that she
She
wanted?
made a hire this week.
Hey,
Now,
that's
the
great.
finance team has been working shorthanded since Carrie was.
Hi, Melissa. Hi, Adam.
Since Carrie was elevated to the CFO spot, her spot has been vacant. We did hire a gentleman. He's been a finance director in a couple different library districts in the Chicago area. And currently, I think, in Oak Park, I want to say, but he'll be joining the team in mid-July. So we're excited about that. He essentially interviewed with the whole finance department, and they are feeling excited about it.
So he won't start till mid-July though?
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know the whole story. It's something, you know, Carrie's going to be out there. The audit team is going to be in. And that was the right time. I don't know.
Okay. And you're just gonna limp along until then?
That was Carrie's call.
Okay. Got it. Anything else?
Not on finance.
Okay. Natural McHenry County?
Yes, I have a report, but I also would like to brief the committee on Carrie's TIF number 3, because I think it's important that you
Not
hear
that Carrie, not Carrie Wise.
Village of Carrie.
The village of.
So after Natural McHenry County, if I can just have, I'll stick to my script, I promise. For Natural McHenry County, so with the state's adoption of the budget, we're expecting to get the full amount of the grant, which is about $340,000, so that's exciting. With that, the board adopted a budget, which is a total of about $568,000. So that's adopted, that will go into effect July 1, which is the fiscal year. You're going to, well, I don't know if the county board will see a letter, but National McHenry County will be writing a letter in support of the Richardson Farms proposal to take the Octagon barn, the Hatch-Keltner Farm property. For those on PED, you're probably very familiar with this issue. The reason behind that is a letter of support because it will create a new venue for McHenry County, and that ties into what naturally McHenry County is trying to do, is promote tourism and looking to get some venues. So you're going to see that not in opposition of the request for the historic preservation, but in support of their request because of the new venue.
And we'll have that before the next meeting.
So
Please.
Okay, well, I'll make sure we get a copy of that. We should have a copy of that, but I'll follow up where it's at. And then finally, just the board's going to start meeting every other month. So the next meeting will be on August 3rd, as opposed to the every month. If something comes up, they can always hold a special meeting, and I think that would just be a little bit more efficient for people's times. There are committees that are working, which will be working, of course, in the interim. So that's the report.
Thank you.
All right.
Any questions? No? Well, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 10:30.
Can I give a TIF update? I'm going to stick to the script. This is
Oh, crap, I thought you did that already.
No, we didn't say anything. If you write down phrase there, there was nothing underneath it.
Now it's presentation too, huh?
It's not a McConaughey 2 minutes, it's actual 2 minutes.
Village of Cary is proposing what they call the Central Cary TIF District number 3. This is the map. Give you some perspective. This is the Fox River. If you can see my cursor, Main Street here is the jog at Route 14, Northwest Highway, to give you some perspective. This TIF encompasses TIF number 2, which is where I'm highlighting the central downtown TIF district. which is still in place, and it encompasses the recently expired TIF number 1, which encompasses all of this property. TIF number 2 was designated in 2006 and did not perform well due to the economy, due to the pandemic. TIF number 3 had some notable successes, including CVS, Burger King, Thornton's, and then this large property is called the Sulky property, which used to have an old industrial commercial building on it that has since been leveled. A lift station was put in, all because of the TIF. The goals of this TIF are really to promote the downtown, to do some intersection improvements with regards to 14 and some of the side streets, with the metro access, promote business within that downtown area. That's really the key focus. However, it's incorporating the recent expired TIF number 1 because they want to promote what's called Jack's Channel, which is this property along the Fox River, and it opens up for the water and sewer potential to, this is called the Arlington Heights Country Club, which is a really unique piece of property because it's like several homes on one piece that predates the Village of Cary corporation. So those are the goals. An overall about $60 million budget. $32 million plus or minus are going to be for public improvements, so more than half of it. That's just that lofty goal that they set with the initial redevelopment plan. So there are three things to note. District 26 has already submitted a letter of objection. Now they sit on the Journal Review Board Committee, but they've already submitted a letter of objection, primarily because of they're saying that it was not going to meet the but-for criteria for a TIF. And this property I'm highlighting is what's called the Maplewood School property, which they own. There are baseball fields on there, if you're familiar with that, and that's from the Cary Youth Baseball that operate all of those fields. But basically saying that the redevelopment opportunities are there, and they have come forward, they just haven't come to fruition. The letter states because of the Village of Cary's requirements, just didn't let the deals go through. Similarly, the Cary Park District issued a letter of concern regarding this TIF district. Their concern was really based on the incorporation of Cary Veterans Park, which is this area here. They're concerned about the preservation of impact fees. If there were development to occur within this TIF district, would they get their impact fees? And they also raised concerns regarding the baseball fields. If this property were developed, what happens to the baseball fields? There are several fields within this area. And at the public hearing in April, there's a public meeting in April, several residents spoke out, many against this because of the Cary Youth baseball and the potential loss of these fields. So this is some controversy on which you as county board to be aware that, especially those members who represent this district, to be aware of these issues. So the county actually has some concerns going into this, and it's mainly with TIF number 1. This has expired, but they're doing what's called a re-TIF. They're going to, it's already expired, they want to add it into another TIF. Because of the successes, including CVS, because of Burger King, which are built.
Burger King's gone, by the way.
What's that?
Burger King's gone, by the way.
Burger King?
It's gone.
Well, okay.
It was there, but it's not gone.
And the structure, so with
The
that.
structure's there, yes.
Yeah, the structure. I wasn't thinking windows, okay. That structure, that redevelopment, was called a commercial redevelopment. And the Thorntons, which is soon to come online, those are all successes in the TIF, and I think that is a good way of saying why the county supports TIFs, because maybe but for the TIF, those wouldn't have happened. Now they're online, if they're re-TIFed, the EAV now gets capped. So CVS, we've got a full EAV on that. The former Burger King building, we got a full EAV. So we're not going to get any more further increment, but this property's already redeveloped, so I think that's not too bad. The Thornton's property is just coming online. There's only a partial tax bill. And so when the full property tax bill comes on in 2020, for the 2024 tax year for next year, the county potentially would not receive the full benefit of that EAV increase, which kind of goes against the purpose of that TIF. We'll get some of it, but it's capped, and that's where it's going to stay, at the 2022 level, which is a partial tax bill. Further, the Sulky property, which is this large property, it's cleared, it's primed for development, because of the TIF allowed that to happen. Now it's primed for development, so anything that goes on it in a TIF, the county really will not see any benefit from that increase in EAV for 23 years. So that's a substantial note. For those reasons, we should be concerned. However, I say that, but I'm going to recommend or suggest that the county's intent would be to still support this TIF as proposed. Reason being is, we're going to get some benefit for those two properties. We're going to lose a little bit for the Thorntons and for the Salke. With TIFs, it's a long game, and I think that I don't think it'd be right for the county to throw the baby out with the bathwater and object to this because of the re-TIFing of TIF 3. So we're going to lose a little bit, but I think in the big picture, it really supports their economic development efforts. Those developments really are essential to drive a lot of the improvements that are needed in this rest of this TIF, and it's needed for contiguity to promote the Jacks Channel redevelopment. So for those reasons, I want to be clear, unless you tell me otherwise, the intent is to support this TIF.
How are we supporting it?
Well, as we're members of the Joint Review Board, we vote on the eligibility, eligibility report, and the ordinances. If we vote no, and the JRB collectively votes no, and the JRB is all the taxing entities affected by the TIF, the county, the school districts, park districts, even the village. If we ultimately vote no, that forces a 3/5 majority of the Cary Village Board to approve this TIF. So it just creates a super majority. They still can do it without our vote, but it just pushes them into a higher level.
We know District 26 is already going to vote, is going to oppose.
Most likely.
Did 155 talk?
They were not there. And then Cary Park District, there was concern, not objection, and they didn't represent what they were going to do. Yesterday, I bring this forward because yesterday there was the first JRB meeting. It was continued to June 27th, at which time we'll expect this vote to happen. But this is why this is timely, and I want you to be aware of it. We'll find out what's going to happen, but the intent is that the county's going to vote yes on it. I can pick apart the report. There's a lot of things I can really question, but in a very high level, I think it's something that we can support. Next steps is, if it's a go, the July meeting for Cary, they'll dissolve TIF number 2, so then they can re-TIF it in TIF number 3. When they dissolve it, there'll be $190,000 plus or minus surplus that goes back to the taxing bodies. We'll receive about $15,000 in cash out of that. July 18 will be a public hearing, and then in August, the Cary Village Board will vote to formally create TIF number 3. That's my report. Any questions?
Larry?
Does the school board's objection create the 3/5 majority requirement?
No, they're one vote on the JRB.
Which is how many votes?
I think there are going to be eight members.
That was my question too. Is if 155 follows suit, that's 2 no votes.
4, 5, 6, 7,
How
8,
many no votes?
9. Village, Cary County, Algonquin Township, McHenry County College, District 155, District 26, Cary Park District, Cary Library District, Cary Fire Protection District. So a total of 9 votes.
If it's good for Cary, it seems like they ought to be able to get the 3/5 vote on their board, one way or the other.
Yeah, if they can't get 3/5 out of, are they a mayor or president?
That's
Mayor?
it. Mayor.
Okay.
If they don't get 3/5, maybe it's not the right thing to do. So
I mean, it is controversial. The rebuilding, there's a lot of residents concerned. And one of their concerns is like, because it's Burger King, it's now empty, isn't it now an empty burger, which is their point. That's their point. You build a building, it doesn't last, and now you've got this building that's stuck there, which used to be green space. So there's a concern about losing green space.
Because they'll lose the park and then the baseball fields.
Right.
So whether or not the parks, I can't speak to that. I know the Cary Park District raised that concern that it is included. I'm not sure specifically why. Sometimes that could be a benefit because you can use TIF monies for public improvements, and that could include the park. The challenge would be this property here, the Maplewood School property. Right now, since it's with the school, there's 0 EAV. So anything that happens is 100% TIF. So we would come.
But they brought forward to Cary proposals for that space.
That's what they're representing in their letter.
Well,
Yeah.
they did. I mean,
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So I'm not disagreeing with what they're saying, because and Cary turned it down.
Yeah.
That's what's in the letter.
Yeah, so
It's one of those, Scott does a good summary. historically, we let municipalities do their thing. You know, this is, for our budget, our 8% of their tax bill, it's fairly nominal. Everything Scott said is true. We aren't going to get development from Thornton's, but it's very important to Cary. It's not that important to our budget.
Our approach has been to generally support the economic development efforts of our municipal partners. I think this is it. I did raise a question at the JRB regarding the inclusion of the CDS property since it's already developed. Why would you put it in there? Similarly with the former Burger King property, Thornton's, and the Salke property. Their response was for contiguity to add in these additional parcels. If you can see where my cursor is. And then to get down to the Jack's Channel, they needed that for contiguity. There's also some additional infrastructure that they've done a high level for the Salke property, so they want to keep these properties in there. Yeah, whether it's an overreach or not, I'm not going to comment. I'm just going to say that was.
Yeah, but I see, this is where I go back to, if it's already developed, you don't need it in the, they got a little flipping box that's all excluded from it. So they could put a little more, couple more little boxes in there. So if you're asking my opinion would be no as presented.
I follow Peter's commentary, absolutely. I think that the county should be letting the municipalities make these determinations. And this was not done indiscriminately. There was a huge amount of thought process that went into this. The Cary as a community or municipality is not just going to ignore or erase the needs for public services or public areas in terms of recreation. There's going to be a plan here. I don't believe that the county should be coming in as one of the partners in growth and development in the larger county in objection to TIF districts. I just don't think that should be our role. Now, school districts almost uniformly oppose them. And they have, I mean, even the state associations say they have seminars on why school districts should be opposing these type of things. McHenry County College usually takes a neutral position on this, which is the other thing, Scott. It's not just a up, a down, but it's also a neutral position. So all of the members have the opportunity to go to neutral positions as well. And I don't believe that we should be one of the parties that puts municipalities into a difficult decision with regards to having 3/5. I will grant that any TIF district which is proposed by a municipality ought to be able to get that, and I think that's one of the bottom line things. They're going to pass it. Their school, I mean, their municipality is going to pass this 3/5 or not. I don't think it does us any good except to put us in a difficult position with them, partnership-wise, to object to this.
I agree with Brian.
Well said.
So are you saying be neutral or vote yes?
Positive.
Yes,
Pardon? Brian, did you-
Positive.
Positive.
yeah, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate this direction, because I don't want to go in representing the county position that you don't support. So I would love to hear from the committee, because you have oversight to these matters.
No, I mean, as a board member, I say positive. As a close resident, I don't like TIFs, but I also don't like TIFs for Fox River Grove, which we already agreed to.
We agree to.
So,
We've agreed to.
right.
We have, how many
Right.
different tips do we have right now? A half dozen? 7?
More than that.
Okay, Scott goes to all the JRBs.
Not everyone meets annually like they should, but.
Right. So yeah, I'm gonna flip it. As a county board member, yes, the answer is I should be positive, but personally, I don't like
Sure.
TIFs.
Well, that's good.
I agree
But
with
there are
what
going to be
Brian said.
times when we have to be obstructionists. Let's not be
Right.
over something like this. We don't have to.
Anyone else? Okay, you got your direction?
I have 3 votes support, 1 votes no, and I intend to support this at the next JRB meeting.
There you go.
All right? Thank you.
Now you done?
I am.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at 10:46. Carrie.
Second.
Brian seconds. All those in favor say aye.